So far, the Bills' plan has been to run it back in 2021, but there's moves to be made. What's the biggest area of need on the roster? What will the plan be in the upcoming draft? And will the Josh Allen deal get done this offseason? Your questions, our answers on this week's edition of the Buffalo Plus Podcast.
Okay, welcome back to the Buffalo Plus Podcast presented by BuffaloPlus.com. Mike Catalana, Dan Fetes. I am Jenna, Cottrell, and we're starting today's podcast with a little bit of some breaking news. Isaiah Mckenzie will be back with the Bills, the wide receiver. I guess long-lived Chick-fil-A, video games, as well
Fortnite.
as jet sweep. We know he's a huge fan of that. But Mike, I want your impression of Isaiah Mckenzie being back and what role you expect him to play and maybe pick up this season.
He's one of my favorite players of all time with the Bills, not just because of what he does. He seems to be a great teammate, do whatever they ask of him, and he is a phenomenal interview guest.
Yes.
But you need him in person. Like, maybe later today we're going to get him on a Zoom, and that's fine. But Isaiah is quietly spectacular in the interview process.
Yes.
And tell everybody, you mentioned the Chick-fil-A, but that was a question about like what he likes to eat. This elite athlete.
No, it was about getting cut. It was about roster cuts being trimmed down in 2019, and we were asking him if he was nervous. And he just shrugged it off as like, nah, I don't get nervous. Like, we're like, what are you going to do tonight? And he's like, I'm going to go home. I'm going to play Fortnite and I'm going to eat Chick-fil-A. And he's like, I do it every night. And it was like the most like candid answer for a guy that was on the bubble with like Ray McCloud and Robert Foster. It was like that season. And he was like, whatever.
I do remember him adding to the fact that he eats a Snickers every night
and a Diet Coke.
Like, dude, you're eating Chick-fil-A and Snickers, and like your abs have abs.
Yeah, and he has a Diet Coke. He's like, I really don't take care of myself. Like, it is what it's like. Okay, but I can just also run like 4.4, like it's nothing.
Yeah,
must be nice.
I add the interview because I posted it again. It was 2 years ago. It also reminds me of being at camp, and we miss being at camp, and you can see all the fans in the background, but. We did Do People Know Rochester? And Isaiah was so good, especially in questions about, first of all, I asked him about a garbage plate. He'd heard of them. Do you want to eat one? No. So he wants his Chick-fil-A, but no garbage plate. But his answers on Sean McDermott, he and Levi Wallace, about Sean's athletic career were just phenomenal. I mean, he said Sean was a kayaker, cross-country runner when we know.
Archery. It was amazing.
Yeah. And that's, well, part of the reason, obviously, we enjoy him around. But on the field, Jenna, Brian Daboll loves him.
Yeah.
He uses him in spots. He is a valuable guy. We were looking at the free agent list from a year ago, the guys they brought in and spent all this money. And you get towards the bottom, and it's Isaiah Mckenzie. I think his number for that year was like $780,000. And it was like he and Justin Zimmer were towards the bottom of the guys they had signed in free agency. And Mckenzie, you could make an argument that he has been the best value on the roster for
100%
that he puts in for the little bit of money that he's made. I hope he's making more, but for the little bit of money he's made.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny, Mike, it's also, like you talk about, it's the niche. Jenna, mentioned it before. It's the jet sweep. It's when he's on the field. There are probably 5 to 6 plays that are just designed for Mckenzie. And he kind of comes in as, we joked around that he's also the scout team. They use the practice quarterback when they've gone up against Lamar Jackson. He's done a lot of things. He got into it a little bit. Like you talk about how great his personality is. He got into it just recently on Twitter. Somebody was saying that possibly, I don't know the Twitter handle, but somebody was saying that you could get another Isaiah Mckenzie on day 3. And Mckenzie's like, oh, really? Like, I had 7 touchdowns, as many as Stephon Diggs. Like, really? Like, and then when you think about that, when you think that Isaiah Mckenzie had 7 touchdowns, you're like, wow, like he was pretty valuable in the red zone. Like, they talk about that at times the Bills kind of struggled to find a red zone target. Like, Isaiah was pretty good with jet sweeps. They lost Andre Roberts to the Houston Texans. He fills that role of a kick returner, a punt returner. So he's really the jack of all trades. And as Mike mentioned, maybe the most interesting man on the team. So it really is kind of a great signing. I think fans were excited to see him back when you looked at some of the restricted free agents or unrestricted free agents who were left to be signed. I think Mckenzie was at the top of the list.
I also think if people aren't at practice, they don't see how much Mckenzie talks. Like Isaiah Mckenzie is always talking, but I think it's funny because you hear him being so active for being a smaller guy, Mike. I feel like he does add that presence to, I mean, look, there's already a lot of personalities in the wide receiving group, but like, I feel like he just adds another layer to that.
Yeah. And that's why I said, I think he's a great guy to have on the team. And, you know, there's times I think teams can look at that as I say almost like a luxury, right? Because the Bills have top end wide receivers, right? I mean, look at who they're running out there now. And to even find snaps and to find plays for Mckenzie, I think is important. And when he's had to fill in the few times, a little bit for Cole Beasley, I mean, he can do that. And I think he's going to maybe have a role in the return game this year, or at least get a shot at it, because I don't think, based on where they are, you know, money-wise and who they brought back, that they're going to designate a roster spot to a specific return guy. Andre Roberts did a really good job for them.
Yeah.
But I think if you can get that out of Isaiah Mckenzie, and we all know in parts, if there's ever a problem, you just put Micah back there.
I was about to say that.
Right?
The punt catcher.
Right. Yeah. But, you know, look, most of the time, you want the guy to make a smart decision on a kickoff, and most of the time you want him to just let it go in the end zone, take it from the 25. But Mckenzie has the ability to make something happen. So I think it's great that he's coming back.
Yeah. And we asked earlier this week on Twitter what questions we wanted to hear from you, if you all had some. And the re-signing of Isaiah was definitely one of the big items that we saw quite a bit. But there were also some other questions. And I'll start here with this question from Dewan Long saying, is Brandon Beane going to make a move for an edge rusher in free agency? Dan, what is your take on that? Because we know, Brandon Beane has been a busy man.
I think there is a move out there, but it's not a splashy move anymore. I think it's a piece. It's a fill-in. It's probably a stopgap, a bridge player, maybe a 1-year deal. Like I said, I keep looking at Ryan Kerrigan, keep waiting to see, where he's going to sign. Some of that veteran presence that maybe they lost with Quentin Jefferson kind of going away. And again, they are getting Star Lotulelei back, who I think will open up things for outside edge rushers. They didn't really have that. We talked about how, Jenna, you've been disappointed with Ed Oliver's season. Yeah. And Star maybe was that stir that kind of, the straw that stirs the drink a little bit to open up things for the outside. So I think he makes a move. I just don't think it's a sexy move. It's like when they signed Jacob Hollister. Everybody's like, the Bills signed a tight end, and everybody's like, and it's like, it's Jacob Hollister. And you're like, okay, all right. So like, resume our daily activities, whatever we were doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is it saying though? It's like Star wasn't the most important player on the team or the best player on the team, but he was one of the most important in terms of.
Well, he's
impactful. Looks like it.
He's impactful there. The other thing you got to keep in mind is you guys, obviously we're all aware of getting to the cap and all these moves teams make. Well, the next stage, depending on what you spend in free agency, is you have to clear up space. Every team does, so that they can sign their draft picks.
Yep.
And that usually, what do teams hold back? Maybe, I don't know, it's like $6-7 million, whatever the number is. Plus, you're bringing in a guy. So pick team A, decides to draft a defensive end in the first round. Somebody's getting cut loose there. There's a whole series of players who become available after the draft. We see it happen. Or even traded on draft day, where a team swaps picks and you flip this guy and that guy, and you see these players show up. So,
sorry.
You see this happen all the time where, like you said, there's still free agents available and they have their eyes on players. But at the same time, there's also going to be some veteran guys who get cut loose, who will look to sign 1-year deals, come in, prove it, and then go to the next step. So absolutely, I think he's going to look for that. And then, hope that AJ Epinesa takes that year 2 jump, and all of a sudden your defensive line looks a heck of a lot better.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And another question jumping off of this is from Jay Finley. He asked, advise what the cap numbers are. Thank you. And I think, we heard so much about the cap this offseason. It's lower this year. Mike, can you kind of explain now that the league new year started March 17. So what this now means about the cap number.
All right. I am not Andrew Brandt, and I will not even pretend to play him on social media. But basically, you got to understand about the cap. There's nuances about it, but you had to be to the cap or below it on the first day of the new year. Mm-hmm. And you have to remain under the cap. Like, it's a hard cap. So at this point, you sign a guy, somebody's got to go. I mean, that's the way it works. And then, like I said, free up money for draft pick signings. But the other part of that is, you can get creative with your cap hits because, as we've been hearing, everybody knows next year it's going up because ABC and Fox and everybody is giving them billions. The cap's going to go up and up and up because they're going to make more money. So how do you want to set up contracts? Do you want to redo other players where you can push the cap hit to next year? You can do that because you're going to have some space. And you heard Bean mention it, it's the cash to cap, like being able to spend right up to the amount that the Bills are getting through ownership. Not every team does that. Right. There are teams below the cap and they stay below the cap. And not the Giants this year, because I believe they think they're going to buy a team quite like New England. But
Salty Mike.
Wow. Well, I mean, come on. Signing defensive backs to a lot of money, it never works. Yeah. The only guy it's ever really worked on, unfortunately for the Bills, I think worked on was Stephon Gilmore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he got paid, and then he got, and he deserved it. I mean, he was a great player.
So it was looking at the cap and trying to answer some of these questions, like the first number that is always reported out is the agent's number.
Yes.
We should get that person some help.
I mean, they're on their way.
The first number is, that Schefter or, all the big guys, it's agents' numbers. And then you start to see, like, even John Feliciano's deal. Everybody's like, oh, sweet, it's a 3-year deal. Like, he's locked up for 3 years. It's like zero guaranteed dollars after this year. So, like, John Feliciano's deal, I even, watched some, looked at some spot track numbers to try and understand this more. It's really a 1-year deal. Like, they can absolutely move on from John Feliciano at the end of this year. And when you hear, like, Matt Milano's 4-year deal and all these things, every deal is 2 years. Like think about it like that. Like that, then they kind of go from there. But to answer the question, and Mike did a great job of trying to explain it, but I've heard it explained to as understanding the salary cap is like trying to nail smoke to a wall. I don't know how it's done. There's one guy, it's Mike's nephew who knows the cap numbers better than anybody.
Wait, my nephew Garrett Catalana is a NBA cap expert.
Capologist.
And I mean, the NBA cap is the 400 level class. The NFL one is the 100 level class because the NBA has all kinds of ways to work around the luxury tax. It's mid-level exceptions. It's crazy. The NFL is crazy, but it's a little simpler and it's a hard cap. So you can't go over it. Right. In the NBA, you can go over it, but in football, you can't. And you have to figure out ways. But to Dan's point, Jenna, you sign the guy. It's listed as 3 years. This way you can give him a bonus. It's more on this year. You spread the cap hit out over the 3 years. That's why you have dead cap money. So when you cut that player, a.k.a. Carson Wentz, all that signing bonus goes on that particular year. That's the danger of doing that. Mm-hmm. So when you look at it and say 3-year deal, let's just say the guy got $3 million signing bonus, 3-year deal, $1 million each year. You cut them after the first year, $2 million goes on the cap next year. That's very simplistic, but that's what it is. But if the cap is that much higher, it gives you more room. So look, Bean was smart. I mean, his deals are smart. Somebody may argue, was everybody worthy of bringing back? I don't, I think they're good players, but we'll see how it plays out. But they didn't really commit crazy money to anybody.
They really didn't.
They got a lot of hometown discounts with the cap being lower and not having the top end guys were still going to get their money. The JJ Watts still got their money, but guys in the middle of the road, there wasn't that big payday that we were talking about on Buffalo Plus that like Matt Milano deserves to go get $15 million. Teams weren't spending $15 million a year on a middle linebacker.
Except the Giants. And New England's contracts aren't that crazy. Like the New England contracts are not that crazy, but they paid a lot of overall money for good players from other teams.
Fact.
And I think that's a difference. You know, the Bills have we can sound like we're, drinking the Kool-Aid here, but the Bills have a culture. These guys are already in it. They come right back to work.
Yeah.
Bringing in new players is, especially new players that get paid.
Payers.
That is a different dynamic in a room.
Yeah.
And when you're an average player that gets paid, teams look at you a little bit like, okay, okay, Nelson Aguilar, okay, whoever it happens to be, Adoree Jackson. Like, it's different than if you bring even J.J. Watt. Look, he's J.J. Watt. The guy's going to go to the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So players expect that. So with the Bills, who's coming back? Matt Milano. Who's coming back? John Feliciano.
Mm-hmm.
They got a little more money. Everybody's happy for them.
Yeah.
So I think it's a different dynamic.
I remember you saying this to me, Mike, and it always stuck with me of like, guys in the room, in the locker room, pay attention to who gets paid. And I think that, I mean, it makes sense, but I feel like when you put it that simply, you're like, yeah, I mean, look, like it's a team, obviously that aspect of it, but for the Bills, like they brought back their guys, but again, it was okay. Like they are good deals, but they're not exceptional in terms of paying the player. But I think, they've done enough to show that they are invested in their guys, and it's not like they were, paying them at a disadvantage or whatever.
Right. And really the guy, it's John Brown is gone, who I think did everything the Bills wanted him to do.
Right.
Yeah.
But they replaced him with Emmanuel Sanders, who in that room I think is going to be very well liked. I think he's going to be that guy. And it's not crazy money for him either. I think in that case, it's why we always say this. And again, I mentioned Andrew Brand. I'm going to steal from him again. Teams do not let go of players that they want to keep. They will find a way to keep them. And we all love John Brown. He did a lot for the team. But he was nicked up, and he did seem to lose a little bit of it. And if they're going to give that money to somebody, they believe. Now, it may not play out that way, but they believe they upgraded with Emmanuel Sanders, so they made the move. And you hide behind the cap a little bit, but you make that move because you think you upgraded.
Well, Mike, I talked to NFL Network's Mike Giardi, and he kind of just said it in the what's being talked amongst the league and scouts and front office guys was just that Brandon Beane, it was just a really, really smart move to let go of John Brown, save $9 million, and then spend $5 to $6 million on Emmanuel Sanders. Like, it's just a smart move. And it still hasn't fully hit me yet that like there's smart moves being made at the Bills front office. Like it's starting to like sink in. Like, like obviously what Beane did was smart. And you hear John Feliciano talk about the praise that he gave Brandon Beane, that like when he talks to you, like there's no BS. Like he's around, he shoots you straight and all of those things. And it's just kind of, when you hear those stories and it's like, man, Beane is privy to everything.
I was about to say, we were not privy before.
Yes. Yeah. And even the, and I don't know if we were going to talk about it, the Trubisky signing, it's for low money. Yeah. It's a guy who has, let's be honest, he has more ability than Matt Barkley. Yeah. He just does. Now, Barkley was not the same as John Brown because John Brown was playing more, but I think Barkley was really good for Josh at the time.
Completely.
But Josh is all grown up now.
It's true. Like, I feel like it was like, hey, we have this guy to help you, this mentor. And now it's like, okay, Josh, you're going to be the guy that they look up to.
Yeah,
now.
And they have to legitimately look at it and go, hey, Josh is out for 3 weeks. Like, we like Matt Barkley, but, we think we're going to upgrade the position. So, and not crazy money, not at all for that kind of money. So, smart, measured moves that improve the team.
We just got the update from the Bills about Isaiah McKenzie 1 year. Officially, yes, Isaiah McKenzie's 1 year deal. So I just wanted to break in there really quick. All right, let's go to, we also got a lot of questions about the draft, which the draft is now about a little over a month away. Paul Rossi tweeting at us, what are the chances the Bills stay at number 30? Remember, they're the 30th pick right now, versus dropping back for extra 2s or 3s. Mike, what do you think of that? Maybe get more draft capital and go back?
It depends on who's there at the time. Mm-hmm. Teams will do that late. There's the whole dynamic of the first round picks with the 5th year options. And now the league has changed the rules on that. in terms of what guys can earn for that fifth year. So sometimes it's a really good thing for a team to have that. Other times they don't like it. So you still have that dynamic at the end of the round. Because by the time you get to 30, unless you aggressively go after somebody, most of the time a team is sitting there looking at 5 guys that they would take there, right? Because now we're at 30.
Yeah.
And if somebody calls them up and says, we have the 4th pick in the second round, and we'll swap and we'll give you a 3 or a 4 next year, or whatever the map's out, a lot of teams will say, let's do it. Let's just go ahead. But the guy that keeps getting mentioned, I know our friend Marcel at ESPN loves Travis Etienne, but I can see why. I think that's a dynamic player out of Clemson. Let's say the Bills have him at that top of that list, and that running back is sitting there at 30. They aren't moving anywhere. They're going to take him. Yeah. Because I think they can do it. I know Dan has like 5 running backs in the first round that the Bills could take, but
so many of them.
But I'm just using that as an example of can they do it? Yes. But they are in that position, and it sounds boring to say best player available. But Dan made the point. All these other positions, it's 1-2 year deals with guys. Like, you draft a corner, you draft a safety. I mean, you could draft a safety. They love Poyer and Hyde. That
was what I thought.
Yeah.
That, like I said, when they drafted, Gabriel Davis and they drafted Zach Moss, like they already had, at the time, they already had Stephon Diggs. They had John Brown. They had Cole Beasley. Like they already had a running back, and they they were really. And Mike, you always go back to it, and when you talk to him at the combine, just the fact that Brandon Beane doesn't want to have to just put guys in right away, and you draft for what you may need in a year instead of having to force something in early. And I look at what they did last year with AJ Epinesa. Yes, that was a need, but they also brought in veterans to fill the gap. Now, did they all pan out? No, clearly, obviously, Quentin Jefferson has already been released. But I look at that this year as I go like, they're a step ahead with AJ Epinesa. Like you're getting a guy that really doesn't have any tread on his tires, like got to, an NFL season under his belt, and they hope that he's the guy, can be a pass rushing guy. So you could see that again at 30, whether it's, I know it's not sexy, but an offensive lineman. Because guess what? You could move on from John Feliciano at the end of the year. You could move on from Cody Ford. You could move on from Mitch Moore. So like an interior lineman would be huge. And not to have to rush him into, this season. So, it would be, Mike, what quarterbacks are still there, because a lot of teams like Lamar Jackson, when they've done it, teams want to almost get up there to get that 5th year control. Right. Baltimore's done it. It usually has always been New England there around 29, 30 or 31. And they're really good at, collecting draft capital. They're not very good at drafting. That's something they're not very good at, but they can get capital. So I wouldn't put anything past Bean. I think last year we were all like, they're going to move back up in the first round. We're like, they're going to move. We all thought like this was going to happen. And he didn't. So you can never, and Bean kind of said it was tough to sit there in the first round.
Right.
And to sit there and wait. And like I said, maybe there's somebody they like at 22 and they can move up a couple spots there. Yeah. Maybe they give up. I don't know that, the Bills used a Wyatt Teller pick the one year to move up. I think that was part of the Stephon Diggs deal. Like they've used a lot of pieces that have gone around. So I wouldn't put anything past Brandon Beane.
They'd take Wyatt Teller back now, wouldn't they?
Oh, in a heartbeat.
Yeah. What happened there? That was shocking. Well, this kind of segues into our next question from Justin Miller. I'm actually going to combine them. Justin asking, what's the top priority in the draft besides best player available? Is it defensive end or running back? And PJ also asking, is it running back or corner 2 at 30? Because they have different they can go in a lot of different directions. And Dan, you mentioned it. They could go inside, like for an interior offensive lineman. Like I feel like with where they're at and where the status of a lot of those guys' deals are, Mike, like they can. Yeah, I know it sounds cheesy to say best player available, but I feel like they could really use the depth really at any position. Yeah, well,
Dan mentioned the tight end before. The tight end is still a need for this team, I believe, if they really want to get a better player out of that. Hollister, again, he's a decent player, and I think he'll help the team. But I think they want to get better. I don't think that's happening in the draft. Some guy shoots up that and becomes something nobody's expecting. But I don't think anybody is taking a tight end past Kyle Pitts until maybe the third round of this draft. So in terms of that, but in all these other positions, I really do believe they're going to draft a corner relatively high.
Yeah.
I think they're going to take a shot at a corner. They like Dane Jackson. And again, he's another guy they picked, and he showed pretty good flashes.
Yeah.
That's like Epinesa. And that's what I like to see. The guy's time was limited, but there were times you looked up and you go, oh, who was that? Oh, it's Epinesa, right? Dane Jackson, we saw that in. So it's good to see that. Maybe they're not ready to do that all the time. But you need corners. Everybody needs corners, right?
We saw it last year, especially like that lack of depth that really,
And, you got competition there. And we don't know what they're going to do with that second corner spot, right? There's veterans that are out there. They're going to be out there the whole time.
Yeah.
You make a play for, and I mentioned it before, Richard Sherman. Okay, even if you did, it's Richard Sherman. He's been around a long time. They're not long-term answers if they did.
Right, and you have Levi Wallace coming back too as well, again on a one-year deal. You're trying to see what you have with Dane Jackson. But one of the positions we haven't talked about, but what about a defensive tackle? What about plugging up the interior on the defensive line? We've talked about what it was like without Starr. Ed really hasn't done, Ed kind of took a step back or plateaued last year. Harrison Phillips has dealt with injuries. Hopefully, he's another year, past the ACL. So I just look at that as another position where you're like, well, they're good there. Like they've got three guys that are all there. And it's like, that doesn't matter. And because if somebody flashes in preseason, if somebody flashes in preseason, maybe they trade Harrison Phillips for a 5th or a 6th round. You know what I'm saying? Like those things happen.
You could make an argument that on the interior of their D-line, the only guy that is almost certain to be back in a year is Ed Oliver.
Yeah.
Star's been around. True. Butler, they cut him down a little bit. We don't know that next year. And everybody loves Harrison. And we hope that for him, he comes back from the injury. But at a certain point, they're going to want to see that. I mean, that's the NFL. They all know it. These guys all know it.
Yeah.
And you move on. This team's good enough. They move on from good players. So to the point of saying, find a penetrating defensive tackle or a 2-gap guy that can do that for you. And maybe they take a shot at somebody early. They could, they do have those options. And I know, like I said, it's actually, it's nice to say you go into the draft and you go, priority 1, they're taking the quarterback this year because it makes it easier for us to focus on which quarterback. Well, here's the good news, Bills fans. You don't need a quarterback. So when you say best player, there are a lot of spots you could take a guy.
Yeah.
And when I say safety, and you just re-sign 2 guys who probably should both be Pro Bowl players, that should tell you the way the NFL works. You're always looking for players.
So linebacker, do you think they would make any moves there? Oh,
well,
sorry.
I will say this. Jermaine Edmonds is getting older.
Yeah.
He's going to be 23.
I think they like Dodson, but I wouldn't be surprised, Jenna. I think the only position I'd be surprised if they drafted – besides a quarterback, because I don't think they need a quarterback. I think I'd be surprised if they drafted an offensive tackle. Besides that, I would be pretty well on board with whatever it was. And Jenna, I'd even go as far to say a wide receiver is not out of the question. Emmanuel Sanders is on a 1-year deal. Cole Beasley is, maybe they look for another slot guy. Isaiah McKenzie, it's a 1-year deal.
That's what they look for.
Yeah.
There are other pieces like Cole Beasley. Again, I think his contract's coming up. I think he's a free agent at the end of this year. I think he signed a 3-year deal with John Brown, and Brown obviously was gone. So you have Stephon Diggs, you have Gabriel Davis, but if this is the offense that you are going to keep in place, maybe after Brian Daboll leaves, and this is what you want to build, and this is going to be 4 wide sets and a spread offense, you can't all of a sudden lose 2 wide receivers and then be like, oh no, we have to overpay for a wide receiver, because that's just not Bean's MO. Yeah. So if there's somebody falls to them late in the first round that they just can't pass up and they can't believe is there, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a running back. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a wide receiver.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised that it's a tight end in the first round, because it doesn't, again, I'm not Todd McShay and understanding all of the prospects out there, but it doesn't seem like there's another tight end with a first round grade. But it's boring. It's not a hot take that they could go literally any position.
It always makes it so interesting and so much fun to see because I feel like there is always that such anticipation for the draft in the first round and the first selection. We're going to go to another question. This is from Coffin Corner. His name is Pat. With no fullback or Lee Smith blocking tight end, what direction are the Bills going to for power formations? Are they still required with this offense? Mike, what's your take on that?
By the way, you do know what Coffin Corner is, right? It's
Yeah,
an old phrase. They don't use it very often.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's about punting.
Okay. Yeah, where it's like right down. Yeah.
To the corner.
They're
Yeah.
also, okay, so I know Pat, and he's in the Tailgating Hall of Fame. I'm not
Oh,
kidding.
congratulations.
Wow. How cool is that? He's like
Congrats,
a diehard
Pat.
Bills Mafia.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
he takes
maybe
it very
that's it. You know,
serious.
his nickname, something to do with the tailgate party. I don't know. Go hang out in the
I
Coffin
don't know
Corner.
if it's that.
Look, the Bills sort of decided that we're not a good power running team, so we'll just do the total opposite. Or we have our 7-foot, 300-pound quarterback, and we'll just let him run around the end and run people over, which is a pretty good offense to have because Josh is pretty good about finding the end zone. He does take some hits, but is pretty good. I don't know what they will do. You know, it's almost like it feels like they're going to get away from that at all. Yes, you need tight ends to block. The Bills wide receivers, I think actually those guys do a pretty good job of that. But Lee Smith was a blocking tight end and a touchdown maker. But I don't know if they actually care that much about that. There are teams that can do this. You throw in the extra offensive lineman.
Yep.
I'm telling you, we might see, you know, you're going to use your roster. There may be plays where Harrison Phillips is lining up in there, and I'm just picking him out.
No, Ike.
As a blocker.
About Ike.
Yeah.
Ike Butker. Like those are the guys. I think Hollister is kind of that H-back. You know, he's kind of that fullback, tight end hybrid. But to Mike's point too, we were kind of talking about it before we started recording, going over some of these questions that like some teams they'll pack it in real tight and just be like, we're gonna move the pile and win the line of scrimmage. The Bills went opposite last year. They said we're gonna spread you out and then we're gonna run through you because we have, like Mike said, a 7-foot tall monster as a quarterback.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what they've done, and especially you're thinking about 3rd and 1 short yardage situation. Look, Josh has been so good in the red zone with rushing touchdowns. He's proven that he knows how to take hits. He's kind of shown that he hasn't gotten laid out. I think the Indy game was probably his worst game in the playoffs where he just took some unnecessary hits again. Yeah. But besides that, you know, he kept himself pretty clean. And I think they like this, you know, 3rd and 1 quick sneaks and little things like that instead of huddling up, getting all the big goons in there and saying like, let's go at it. I think they've gone more sneaky.
You know who's going to do that, Jenna? The Detroit Lions. And the play is bite the guy's kneecap and score the touchdown, I believe, right? Isn't that what Dan Campbell wants to do in Detroit?
Yes.
Yeah, bite their kneecaps. So
that is terrifying. Well, we bring up Josh, and we know Brandon Beane has been busy putting together stuff, other deals. I mean, Dan, do you think, Beane talked about in his not end of the year press conference, but the press conference a couple weeks ago of like, we have a target range of when we'd like to start talking about it. May to maybe summer, but do you think something gets done before the start of the season?
I would hope so. And for me, all I go after is thinking that every day that you don't sign him, there's a possibility that Josh becomes more expensive. And if the Cleveland Browns were to sign Baker Mayfield tomorrow and they give him more money than Dak Prescott, say they go then with what Dak got 40 and they give Baker 42. Well, now Josh is now up to 44 or 45 because Josh says, I'm better than Baker. And the number can grow. So that's the only thing I would say. Mike is always waited out, no rush. You don't need to sign Trey White. Like you can franchise him. You got your 5th year. Then you can franchise him again. And you can just have him play on 1-year deals for the rest of his career is Mike Catalana's attitude towards this. But I think that the sooner the better.
Okay, so here's what I will tell you. It always works out for the quarterback.
Dan, you're wrong.
No, it always works out for the quarterback. Yeah. Dak Prescott, they played hardball with Dak Prescott for 3 years. Then Dak Prescott suffered a terrible injury. And then Dak Prescott came back and the Cowboys paid him a lot.
Yeah.
And he's set up to get another contract if he plays well. Carson Wentz got his deal early, flamed out, got traded. He's still getting the money. Jared Goff, the same thing. Like, those guys get paid. And Patrick Mahomes got paid on the earlier side. And they'll end up redoing that deal 5 times before they give him another $1 billion. Like, it's always going to work out if you're that quarterback.
Yeah.
And I like the way Bean typically, by the way, how about the fact he tried to make a joke at the news conference?
I liked it.
Yeah.
But he was like, well, he's going to give us the hometown discount. Oh, no, in all seriousness, like, yes, Brandon, we knew you were kidding. He is, he doesn't go the stand-up comic route very often, but they don't need to do that.
Sense of humor.
He does. But what I'm saying is conversations with Josh Allen are important.
Yeah.
Dan thinks I'm playing hard line. Don't sign him. I'm saying is you're not at a deadline. But I do think it does make sense, both for the team and for Josh, to get a deal done. And you have to remember this. Once Josh signs, like, okay, Dak signed. When Josh signs, like, the next guy's probably getting more, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the way it goes. So you accept as a player that when you sign, I mean, obviously Mahomes should be the highest paid quarterback, but he's not per year. And the guaranteed money, Dak, and all those things that work out the way it works out. But they'll end up redoing the deal. So, hey, look, if they said we want to do it, I will put it to you this way. I'd be surprised if Josh doesn't want to get a deal done before the season.
Same.
Yeah, I would be surprised. But if
you don't want that hanging over,
I
like, you don't want us
I feel
asking
like I
that
wouldn't want the
question.
distraction. I would just want to be able to focus.
100% agree.
Yes, and what I said about the cap in terms of how they would move the money and to be able to do it, you've got to spread that cap hit out. And if he's the right guy, here's what you hope. Just like we said before when getting Josh, you hope you're re-signing him and you got to pay him all this money because the Bills have never been in that spot. You hope there's a point where you look and go, oh my God, Josh Allen is underpaid with his next contract, right? Because how is he not the highest paid guy? Because if you're in Kansas City and once Josh Allen and Dak Prescott have signed, you're Pat Mahomes, you're looking around going, okay, but he got his deal and he got paid. I think they'll all be fine. But how about this? I'm in favor of them getting it done this offseason. How about that?
Okay. Look at us all on the same page. I agree. I just feel like I wouldn't, if I were him, I wouldn't want that over my head.
Agreed.
Because it is a lot of money. You know, you're going to get paid. You know, it's going to happen at some point. So it's like I feel like I would just, it's a lot of money regardless.
He's right there at being the guy. Like everybody knows it because he had a phenomenal year. But like the deal Garoppolo got, and you see now how easily San Francisco could get out of it. Jimmy Garoppolo was not that guy. He hadn't played, but they needed to sign him. And that deal, to Dan's point, was a big agent number.
Yeah.
But it ended up being where, he got him to the Super Bowl and all, but like he could have gone moved from him. Whereas these other deals are more invested with the team. So you better hope the guy's around in playing that way for once the deal kicks in. 3 more years at that point. Because, Dan, those are the deals that aren't 1 and 2 year deals. That's where you've got a good 5 years invested in the guy.
Yeah.
That's very true. What's it like making quarterback money, Mike?
God, can you imagine, though? I mean, can you imagine? We were thinking about it. Like the guy, you keep in mind, the NFL paychecks are the 17 weeks of the year. So it's an odd thing. Like you only get paid during the season, but map that out with a $40 million paycheck for guys. So you're talking about every paycheck every week. If he's getting it in his salary is, $2.4 million a week.
When that direct deposit hits.
Yeah, he's not sitting there going.
Podcast though. We have exposed brick. If you're watching on YouTube, we have exposed
new setup.
Thanks to
5,000 subscribers.
Well, Dan, congratulations on that.
Why you got to be like that?
Well, I just want to highlight.
We do want to say thank you though, because
it's great.
We've hit 5,000 and we really appreciate this. And
and we love our loyal followers. And some people have been with us since Dan came up with the idea to get on YouTube. But tell everybody else too, because come on. You have fun when you watch us, right? I mean, we do try to keep it. I mean, we got information for you, but we try to keep it fun. It is football, and you have a good team, Bills fans. That's great. Doesn't always happen, as you know. So
take advantage.
We try to keep it fun.
Dark days.
And we do try to keep content on here all the time. So once you subscribe, it's just there for you. You're ready.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's wrap up here, though, because we will have plenty more on buffaloplus.com and, of course, on the YouTube page. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed the content. For Mike Catalana and Dan Fetes, I am Jenna Cottrell. We will try to end this podcast, and we will see you all later. Thanks for watching.